This is the story of how a group of alien students armed with arrogance and data laughed at Earth's oceans until something laughed back. What began as a routine probe became silence, then a reckoning. Because the ocean remembers, and it doesn't forgive mockery. From orbit, Earth's oceans looked like an afterthought, shiny but unimportant. The alien students of Cohort 9, fresh from their second-year xenoscience exams, gathered in the observation dome and looked down at the blue planet with a mix of amusement and disdain. Their instructor, Leorin Vec, pointed to a hologram display showing data scrolling beside it. Unmapped, shallow, lots of life, but not very advanced. By all current standards, this is a primitive environment, he said. The students hissed with quiet laughter, part sympathy, part mockery. Everyone agreed. Earth's oceans were just old puddles filled with oversized sea creatures. Cadet Pellix, the loudest of the group, tapped his exo sleeve and asked, "Professor Vec, if the species down there is really that outdated, why hasn't the Terran Coalition fully mapped it?" Leorin casually waved his data tablet. "Their tech can't handle the pressure down there, and they spend more effort on space than on their own oceans. Not a smart choice." That settled it. To them, Earth's oceans were just salty dark soup with little value. And the humans? Interesting on land, maybe, but underwater? Useless. So the students came up with a challenge. They would send one of their skimmers, an unmanned vessel with deep-sea sensors, tentacle drones, and sonar tools, to explore. Maybe it would even bring back a souvenir for their dorm room. They got approval quickly. The mission seemed simple, low risk, lots of potential for jokes. The vessel, called Krolux Minor, launched from orbit and dove into the Pacific Ocean, heading for the Mariana Trench. The live feed showed some glowing jellyfish drifting by. A giant squid floated past slowly, showing no interest. The cadets were unimpressed. Pellix pretended to drown himself out of boredom. But then, things got interesting. The sonar picked up a deep, low-frequency sound. It had a steady rhythm, a signal that didn't match earthquakes or whale songs. It came from the bottom of the trench, almost 11 kilometers down. The video feed started glitching. "Minor interference," Leorin said, adjusting his tablet. Then the signal went dead. Nothing. Krolux Minor had disappeared. Within 12 minutes, orbital sonar from 3 Terran satellites picked up something rising from the trench. Slow, massive, no propulsion, no known heat signature. A reading that made no sense at all. The first to react on Earth wasn't a scientist or politician, but a former Navy diver turned Marine safety officer named Grant Myers. He was in a submersible near the Guam Deep overseeing a routine pressure test of experimental hull plating when the military pinged his team. Unidentified underwater movement, possible wreckage. He was closest. They needed visuals. "Understood," Grant muttered, settling into the pilot seat of the Lancer 4. "We'll approach with caution." They never made it to the trench. 2 hours later, he surfaced on manual control, bleeding from his ears, gasping through a cracked helmet, and rambling about a wall of flesh and eyes big as pickup trucks. The Lancer's external hull was partially crushed in 3 symmetrical arcs. Grant was immediately airlifted to Naval Medical in Okinawa. His left eardrum had ruptured. Both radius bones in his arms were fractured, standard for sudden high-pressure shifts. He had 2 broken ribs and a contusion on the back of his skull. Recovery time was estimated at 8 to 12 weeks, minimum. He drifted in and out of sedation for days, repeating one phrase whenever lucid. It was waiting. Meanwhile, the alien cadets were silent. The mission log showed the Krolux Minor had completed exactly 62 minutes of exploration before being crushed with enough force to liquefy its core. Emergency telemetry suggested the pressure spike came not from below, but from the side. Something had grabbed it. Cadet Pellix, now pale green and sleep-deprived, replayed the sonar logs in private, over and over, until he could trace a pattern. Thump. Thump. Pause. Thump thump. Cadence? He asked, unnerved. Professor Vec had grown uncharacteristically quiet. Not tectonic, not mammalian. The spacing is too regular. One Terran marine biologist, Dr. Helena Carr, had an idea. She reached out to the coalition liaison, demanding full access to alien records of oceanic interference. You want us to believe you stirred up a... What, exactly? She asked through gritted teeth during a live session. Vec tilted his head. We cannot speculate. The creature's biomass exceeds all known aquatic entities on Earth by a factor of 8. Based on sonar displacement, it may span 2 kilometers. It appears hostile and intelligent. Helena blinked. You think you woke up a goddamned Kraken. Vec paused, then scrolled to the human archive footage that had been circulating among his students for laughs. A centuries-old woodcut of a colossal squid tangling with a galleon. Kraken, he repeated slowly. Yes, perhaps. Within days, ocean traffic was rerouted across 3 continents. Submarines were grounded. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force deployed unmanned drones to trace the movement, which by now had vanished from sonar entirely. But Earth wasn't the only planet worried. The Intergalactic Academic Council received a formal violation report from Earth's coalition. Unauthorized interference, diplomatic misconduct, possible biohazard exposure. Cohort 9 was recalled. 2 of its students were suspended. Lioran Vech was summoned for questioning, and the cadets were warned. Earth's primitive bathtub had teeth, big ones. Still, the students argued. Maybe the humans were exaggerating. Maybe Grant Myers had suffered hallucinations. Maybe... Then came the footage. Grant, now stabilized and in a cast, was interviewed by Helena Carr in a private session at the hospital. His arm was in a sling, his skin still marked with deep bruises, his eyes red and watery from residual barotrauma. You said it was waiting, Helena began. Grant exhaled. We didn't disturb it, we triggered it, like how a sleeper twitches in a dream and swats a mosquito. Helena leaned forward. What did it look like? Grant swallowed. I didn't see the whole thing, just flesh. Bigger than the sub, scales in some places, in others like exposed muscle. And the eye. My God, like it could see the inside of you. He paused. It wasn't curious, it was angry. His vitals started spiking, and a nurse came in to sedate him. Before slipping into unconsciousness, he mumbled, "We thought the oceans belonged to us." Helena shut the feed. She was pale now, too. 2 days later, sonar detected another movement. Not rising this time, but circling. Depth unknown, speed variable. No vessel dared approach. Pelix and his cohort were returned to orbit, confined to a research module under academic probation. The human diplomatic liaison sent up a care package, one model of the Lancer 4 bent in half. A small card was attached. Next time, knock. It took another full week before the ocean moved again. This time, no alarms were triggered, no sonar spikes sent technicians scrambling. The signal was soft, almost lazy, like a tidal stretch after a long slumber. At the Pacific Seismic Monitoring Station near Palau, a geotechnical intern named Eric Grady was on the night shift, pouring cheap coffee into a cracked mug when the display flickered. It wasn't much, just a pulse of displacement deeper than any registered tremor he'd seen. Not seismic, not animal, not equipment failure. He flagged it, logged the coordinates, and sent a quiet alert to Naval Command. He doubted it would matter. Last week's hysteria had already made half the staff skittish. They'd tagged it Kraken fatigue. But Eric's ping didn't vanish into bureaucracy. It landed on the desk of Rear Admiral Fiona Lasky, who'd personally reviewed the wreckage of the Lancer 4 and led the post-incident debrief with Grant Myers. She hadn't slept properly in days. Plot the new coordinates, she told her team, and get me a visual sweep, thermal, infrared, LiDAR, anything. Down in Okinawa, Grant was just starting physiotherapy. His arm, still healing from dual radius fractures, trembled under even light resistance bands. Every breath reminded him of his cracked ribs. Recovery wasn't linear, his doctor had said. He was 2 weeks in and couldn't even lift a jug of milk without cursing under his breath. Helena visited again, this time with a sealed tablet in hand. "You're not going to like this," she said, sliding it toward him. Grant watched the new sonar feed. The same slow pulse Eric had flagged now showed a displacement pattern. But not like before. Not aimless. It was following something. One of the unmanned survey drones dispatched by the Japanese fleet. The drone's last footage showed what looked like underwater canyons, and then, briefly, part of something sliding past the camera lens. A section of grayish skin, ridged like the hull of a ship, but organic. Then darkness. Static. End of transmission. Grant leaned back slowly. "It's moving intelligently." "Not just that," Helena replied. "It's responding. You scared it, or woke it, or maybe it remembered something." "Remembered?" She tapped her temple. "Some species carry generational trauma. Whales, elephants. They mourn, avoid areas where family died. If this thing is as big as we think and as old, it may not think the way we do. But it remembers. Maybe we dropped too deep, too fast." Meanwhile, aboard the alien research module orbiting Earth, Cohort 9 was unraveling. Cadet Pelix hadn't spoken in a day. His roommate, Tolan, caught him staring at archived sonar feeds, hands trembling. "We joked about the oceans. We laughed." Instructor Vec was no longer dismissive. He requested a direct communication line with Earth's Marine Defense Council. It was approved within hours. "I believe we triggered a biological sentinel," he stated to Admiral Lasky via HoloLink. "Your cultural mythos calls it Kraken, but its actual classification is irrelevant. It operates on stimulus response. It's not a monster, it's a warning system." Fiona narrowed her eyes. "You're saying this isn't even the main threat?" "I'm saying it may not be alone." That same day, a U.S. research vessel, the Shale Horizon, went missing 110 nautical miles east of Papua New Guinea. The only transmission it sent before silence was a 5-second garbled clip of crew screaming, followed by a thud so deep it rattled the sensors in California. Public panic spread. Media outlets downplayed it, calling it equipment failure, but in military briefings, the phrase deep ocean hostile bioform was now used with chilling regularity. Helena, growing desperate, suggested bringing in someone who could dive again, someone who'd seen it and survived. Grant, overhearing through the hospital wall, asked to see her. "You're thinking about putting someone back down there," he said, wincing as he sat up. "Not yet," she said. "You will." Helena hesitated. "You're not ready." "I don't care." His bones weren't fully healed. The orthopedic specialist said his arms needed another 4 weeks at least to tolerate pressure gear. But Grant pushed. He began training anyway, one movement at a time. Breathing drills, resistance therapy, controlled pool dives with weighted suits. Pain flared constantly. But so did memory. That eye, that understanding. He had to go back. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because the thing below wasn't just powerful, it was thinking, and humanity needed to know what it was thinking about. 3 weeks passed. The pulse grew stronger. Then, for the first time, it responded to sonar pings with its own signal. A deep clicking rhythm. Not language, exactly, but not random either. The alien cadets, now assisting Terran linguists, noticed the rhythm mirrored seismic frequencies from a 1960 undersea nuclear test in the South Pacific. The timing matched almost perfectly. "We didn't wake it," Tolan whispered, reading the data. "We reminded it." On Earth, a joint mission was approved. 1 human, 1 alien, 1 submersible. The Oberon, a prototype deep-sea craft with reinforced carbon silicate shielding, was retrofitted for extreme pressure, with dual control systems. Grant was cleared to pilot. Cadet Pelix volunteered to accompany him. The selection sparked debate. Alien Command objected. Earth officials hesitated, but the logic held. 2 witnesses, 2 systems, 1 chance. They launched from a naval carrier at dawn. Inside the Oberon, Grant's hands ached inside his suit. He flexed his healing fingers. Pellix, seated beside him, looked equally tense. "Where would you volunteer?" Grant asked. Pellix stared into the dark viewport. "Because I mocked your oceans, and I think I owe them an apology." Descent was slow. They passed 5,000 meters, then 8,000, then 10,000. The trench opened before them like a scar in the planet. Then movement. Not fast, not aggressive, but deliberate. An eye opened in the dark. Oval, unblinking, luminous as the sun behind fog. Grant's mouth went dry. "There you are." Pellix began to shake. The creature drifted into view. Not in full, just one limb. Miles long. Textured with barnacle-like ridges, and etched into it, clear as carved stone, were patterns. Not natural. The Aspipita. Pellix exhaled. "It's not just a warning system." Grant nodded, gripping the controls. "It's a library." The submersible lights flickered. Not from a malfunction, but as if the darkness outside had shifted in response to them, absorbing more than just illumination. As Grant adjusted the pitch of the Oberon, Pellix leaned closer to the viewport, squinting at the glyphs now glowing faintly on the enormous appendage. Each symbol pulsed with a bluish hue, not in uniform rhythm, but in a slow, irregular beat, like a language unsure if it was being heard. "Are we recording this?" Grant asked. Pellix blinked. His voice hushed. "Multiple feeds, optical, thermal, multispectral. But I don't think it's a message for us. I think it's remembering." Grant turned slightly, one hand bracing against the side rail to relieve pressure on his half-healed ribs. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, but it grounded him, made the enormity of what lay beyond the viewport feel real again. This wasn't a dream or psychosis or deep-sea hysteria. The creature had markings. Structured, deliberate, ancient. "We've seen similar patterning in ice core fossils on Enceladus," Pellix added, "but not alive, never, breathing." As the Oberon hovered, the creature shifted again, gently, like a whale rolling in sleep. A massive eye, if it could be called that, settled on them, rimmed with glistening iridescence. Then came another sound. Not a thump or pulse this time. A vibration. Low, harmonic. It rattled the reinforced hull and made Grant's teeth ache. Pellix covered his ears, jaw tight. "Subharmonic resonance," he said. "It's communicating." Grant nodded grimly. "We're not equipped to answer." Then, without warning, something stirred in the abyss behind the creature. A ripple in the blackness. Not water movement. Pressure distortion. Another limb? No. Something else entirely. Another presence. For a moment, Grant felt suspended in a memory not his own. A flicker of burning sky above water. Ships breaking. A scream, not in sound, but in feeling. Grief, rage, loss. Then the image snapped away. The Oberon shuddered. Pellix looked pale. "You felt that too? Like it pushed something into us." "What was it?" "History." Grant's heart pounded. His injuries protested even the stress of sitting upright. He checked the vitals. Blood pressure elevated, left rib possibly worsening under strain. He'd need evaluation soon. But he couldn't stop. He flicked on the external translator, cycling through modulated sonar pulses to try matching the resonance. Pellix assisted, running pitch algorithms. After several failed attempts, one echoed back. Not mimicked, matched. It was like humming a note in an empty cathedral and hearing a choir respond. The glyphs began to shimmer in waves. Up on the surface, Admiral Lasky and Helena watched the feed in stunned silence. Helena whispered, "It's language, written, oral, and sensory." But in orbit, A different panic was spreading. Instructor Vex stared at the real-time data. Another signal, same frequency, different location. It was coming from the Arctic. A second mass, rising. Back in the trench, the creature moved slowly, curling its vast body back into the deep like a spiral receding into its center. The glyphs dimmed. "Wait," Grant murmured. "Don't go." But the creature paused. The sonar returned. One final pulse deeper than the rest. A coordinate. Helix was already running it. Greenland, shelf edge, deep fault zone. Grant looked at him. "That's the other one." The Oberon began its ascent, automatically prompted by time and battery protocols. Pelix slumped in his seat, the data console still running. "We weren't studying an animal, we interrupted a network." By the time they broke the surface, both men were silent. Grant was immediately taken aboard the carrier and rushed to medical. His ribs had shifted again during descent, pressing dangerously close to his left lung. A fresh scan confirmed what he already felt. The intercostal muscle around the fracture was inflamed, and he'd likely aggravated a micro-tear near the pleura. The ship's physician gave him IV anti-inflammatories, pain meds, and orders to remain bedridden for at least 72 hours. Pelix stayed by his bedside, scanning their shared data. "There's more than one," he said quietly. "The one we saw, call it Kraken? It's like a relay post, a biological archive." Grant blinked up at the ceiling. "And the others? We don't know." Helena arrived 24 hours later. She waited until Grant was conscious before sitting down beside him. "I've been running those glyphs through every mythological, linguistic, and paleo-Somalic database we have. Some of the markings resemble pre-Ice Age cave etchings from Norway." Grant furrowed his brow. "That's not possible." "Exactly. Unless humans didn't invent those symbols, just remembered them." Outside, the sea rolled calmly, as if nothing had happened. But it had, and the Arctic was next. The Arctic mission was launched 72 hours later under strict blackout protocol. No public disclosures, no surface media, no broadcast transmissions above encrypted deep-frequency bandwidths. The diplomatic delegation from the Intergalactic Academic Council had finally arrived in Earth orbit, quietly furious and sharply dressed, offering nothing but disapproval and a formal apology. It changed nothing. What moved beneath the Greenland shelf had begun to stir faster. The vessel chosen for the mission was Kestrel Blue, a modular twin-hull deep-sea explorer retrofitted from an oil service rig. On board were Helena, Cadet Pelix, and Commander Royston, an elite submersible pilot brought in after Grant's worsening injury ruled him out. Grant, still bedridden and on anti-inflammatory IVs, had argued to go anyway. He was overruled by both his orthopedic surgeon and Admiral Lasky. "You're healing, Grant," Lasky said firmly during his final evaluation. "You want to get back in the water? Fine. In 3 months. Minimum. We need you alive." Grant knew she was right. His ribs still burned when he turned too fast, and his left arm trembled under weight. The intercostal inflammation was subsiding, but every doctor on the carrier reminded him it could relapse with one wrong twist. He relented, bitterly. But his mind didn't rest. He studied everything Pelix transmitted from the Oberon logs, every glyph, sonar echo, pressure pattern. It wasn't just communication, it was architecture. The creature's body formed spatial sequences, like a cathedral grown from the inside out. And now it had passed the signal. The Arctic Kraken, as it was now unofficially named, responded 3 hours before Kestrel Blue made visual contact. This one was faster, more animated. It didn't rise slowly like the Pacific Sentinel, it surged. In the control room, Helena and Pelix watched the seismic graph spike. "It's not dormant," Helena muttered. "It's searching." Below the ice shelf, the sonar painted a shape that was impossible, not spherical, not serpentine, concentric, as if multiple beings, identical in structure, coiled around a single central point. "What is that?" Royston asked. Pelix swallowed. "A cluster, or a birthing ring." Helena's knuckles whitened around the console edge. You think it's creating more? Or regenerating them? Royston adjusted their descent vector. At 10,300 meters, the submersible lights illuminated something terrifyingly familiar. More glyphs. This time etched not on flesh, but the ice walls of an underwater cavern. Not written on the creature, written by it. Tool use, Helena whispered, intentional design. This isn't an animal. It's a civilization. The sub drifted into the open chamber. The shapes coiled in the water ahead were massive. Not alive, not anymore. Fossilized, dead for millennia. The Arctic Kraken wasn't alone. It was guarding. And then the living one arrived. It came from above, a spiral of motion so large that the sub's cameras lost resolution at the edges. It hovered just long enough to cast its reflection over the frozen walls. Pelix's translation software began pulsing, a repeating pattern. One phrase, simple. Way again? Pelix stared at it. It remembers the last time? Helena looked pale. Nuclear detonations, deep-sea drilling, underwater warfare, all of it, trauma to their world, to their dead. The creature sent one final pulse through sonar, a low, oscillating hum that carried across every naval satellite frequency in the hemisphere, a wave of sound that traveled into every deep trench, ridge, and shelf. It wasn't attacking, it was calling. Back aboard the carrier in the Pacific, Grant watched the telemetric cascade, movement detected in 6 separate oceanic locations, all identical patterns, all submerged for centuries, maybe longer. But they weren't rising, they were listening. In the following weeks, the Intergalactic Council held a summit aboard the orbital research station. Humanity was invited not as defendants, but as contributors. The conclusion was sobering. Earth's oceans were not uncharted bathtubs. They were sacred grounds. The Kraken were not monsters. They were sentient custodians of the planet's memory, possibly older than recorded time. Their silence was never a sign of simplicity. It was restraint. Diplomatic channels were opened. Terran and alien scholars began building a shared repository of glyph translation. Fishing routes were redirected. Deep drilling halted in specific regions, flagged by sonar response. And Grant, though still recovering, was invited to co-lead a new joint program, Deep Memory Reconciliation, aimed at fostering respect for the abyssal species Earth had forgotten existed. He declined command, but he accepted a desk near the harbor in Seattle, within sight of the sea. He still woke sometimes, clutching his side, breath short from phantom pressure. Healing wasn't linear. He wore a rib brace some days and worked with a physical therapist twice a week to regain full strength in his arms. The doctors estimated another 6 weeks before full recovery. But he was alive. And more than that, he had seen. The next time alien students discussed Earth's oceans, there was no laughter, no mockery, only quiet awe. One cadet, newly enrolled, asked why a planet with so many ancient guardians had let its oceans go unexplored for so long. Grant smiled faintly when he heard the recording, because he knew the answer. They hadn't gone unexplored. They had simply been ignored, until something down there reminded the world, through sonar and scars, through memory etched in the bones of the deep, that oceans do not forget. They remember, and sometimes they answer.